Today is May 3rd, 2024. I'm Gabriele Fellows with the Museums of Lake County, and this is an oral history interview with Charlie Diener. Charlie, how are you doing today?
Doing really good, thank you.
So to get started, what can you tell us about your name? Were you named after anyone?
Yeah, my full name is Charles Irwin Diener, and my first name was a family name that was passed down on my mother's side of the family from a gentleman by the name of Charles Cadden Reed, who was the direct descendant of James Fraser Reed, who was a major player in the Donner Party that came over in, I believe, 1849, 1848, when they got stranded up in the Sierras.
Oh, okay.
And they settled in San Jose after the Donner Party catastrophe. And his first son that was born when they arrived in California after the Donner Party, his first son was Charles Cadden Reed Sr., and that's how the name carried down to his son, and then my grandfather, and then me.
Oh, wow. What is your date of birth and how old are you?
I'm December 30th, 1963, and I just turned 60.
And where were you born and raised?
I was born in Lakeport, California at Lakeside Hospital, and my doctor was Dr. Craig, who was the doctor of many people, including my father.
Oh,
for
really?
many years. Yeah, he was at the very end of his career when I was born.
Oh.
But he was my father's doctor too.
Oh,
who
wow.
was in the 20s.
Oh, cool.
No.
And what were your parents' names?
William Diener, and that was actually went by Bill Diener, and my mother was Joanne Reed, and then Diener, and then she's now Mummer.
And do you have any siblings?
Yes, I do. I have my brother Bill, who lives here in Lower Lake and is a big part of the community with the Action Committee, and he's a school board member, and he's puts a lot of time into the community and helped the schools with coaching and things like that. And we're also work our family ranch together that we passed down, and Bill and I run it now. And then I have a brother who lives in Kentucky. They have a horse farm in near Versailles, Kentucky, which is just outside of Lexington, thoroughbreds. And we were just back there not too long ago and visited with them. And then I have a brother, Jim, who is deceased in 2014.
Oh, okay. And who is the earliest ancestor you know about?
In Lake County?
In anywhere?
Anywhere?
Yeah.
Oh, it would be James Fraser Reed, who was part of the Donner Party, and that's on my mother's side of the family.
And where did your ancestors migrate from?
They originally came from Europe, but the history is not too clear on exactly where they came from in Europe. But my great-great-great-great-grandfather, James Fraser Reed, they started out in Springfield, Illinois, I believe it was, that's pretty much where they lived, and that's where they set out with the Donner Party. And then they came across the country.
Some were from Germany too, right?
Oh yeah, that's where they originally, not so sure on my mother's side. I know I have German on my mother's side, but on my father's side, they all came from Stuttgart, Germany.
And talk about your relatives that met up with the Kugelmans in Calistoga. Tell us that story.
Yeah, that would have been when my great-grandfather and my grandfather, who was a little boy at the time, they came over from Germany in 1882. And when they came over, they didn't have a lot of money, and they came in to, they ended up coming into the Bay Area, and they got on the wrong train, and there was a language barrier at the time. They spoke German. And they ended up at the end of the line in Calistoga, because they were meant to go They were wanting to go down to, I think, the Sacramento Valley or Salinas, not sure exactly where they wanted to go, but they wanted to farm there. And they ended up in Calistoga, and they didn't have a lot of money, the way the story goes. And just by happen chance, they met up with Milt Kugelman, and he knew their family and knew them from Germany, just by chance. And he ended up hiring them. He spoke their language and ended up hiring them. And they ended up coming up over St. Helena Mountain in his buckboard, the whole family. And he hired them as indentured servants for a few years. And they lived in his barn for probably 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there. We're not exactly sure. And there's an old story that was passed down a little bit about my great-grandmother who was absolutely fed up with living in the barn because she just didn't want to live with the rats anymore.
Oh.
And so they managed to find a way to, they worked real hard and they found a way out.
Oh, good. And describe the neighborhood or community you grew up in.
Well, my brothers and I originally grew up, for the first few years of our lives, we grew up right here on Adams Street behind the Clear Lake Machine Shop. And it was a great place to grow up, right here in Lower Lake. My brother and I always joked about how it was like Mayberry RFD here. It was just a small town community and everybody looked after everybody else. And as far as being a kid, it was a wonderful place. I mean, everybody knew each other. We could go in any of our neighbors' houses and likewise, and just a fun time. It's a real fun time growing up.
Do you remember how Lower Lake was different back then?
It was just a very small town community. It was great. I remember the Christmas lights that used to hang from the street pole, the power poles and the telephone poles going down the street. I remember them strung across the entire street all the way down. And my dad used to hang those lights many of the years that they were up. And then I remember the Christmas tree that my dad would go up and get a large Christmas tree out of Cobb somewhere and bring it down here for Main Street, and they'd put it in the street, right in the middle of the street in right by Lake Street down there, and they'd put it there and they'd decorate it with lights and everything, and it was really beautiful. And I remember that as a small child, how cool it was. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere along in the early 70s, somebody came driving out of Lake Street real fast and took out the tree, and
oh no,
that was the end of the tree.
Oh.
And then the lights they just stopped doing them. My dad couldn't do them anymore, and they just stopped doing them. And then they put all the underground power in, so there was really no poles to hang them from anyway. So, so it was really cool. It was nice.
And what did your father do for a living?
My father was a farmer, a mechanic, a welder. He worked down here with Bud Boyce at the Clear Lake Machine Shop for many years, and farmed his whole life, our ranch. And he worked very, very hard. He was a very hard worker. I have a lot of respect for him.
Is that all he did?
Well, he was in the Air Force during World War II. He was in the Army Air Corps. When Pearl Harbor happened, he always told me this story about how he heard the news come in over his car radio. He was a senior in high school, and he graduated in '42. And he was a senior in high school, and he just remembered how his heart sunk to his toes when he heard the news about Pearl Harbor, and that he just knew that he was going to have to join up, and he ended up doing that, joined up, and spent 4 years in the Army Air Corps as a mechanic. So.
And your dad went to the schoolhouse in the 30s, right?
Yeah, I believe he went to this very schoolhouse when he was in elementary school.
Okay.
And then they built the high school and he went to high school there. He was in, I think, the class of 42 was the first class to graduate out of that. I could be wrong, but I think they were the first class to graduate out of the new schoolhouse, which is now the administration building down at the high school site. And he went here, I believe, as a young boy in elementary school.
Neat.
I remember him telling me stories about they had these big tires that they would get in, and they'd roll down the hill, get inside them, and then they'd roll down the hill towards the brick hall.
Oh, cool.
I hope they didn't crash into something.
And he cut the oak slab known as El Robo Grande that we have outside.
Yeah, that was an interesting story too. My dad and my uncle Ernie, the tree fell down across the highway, and as the story goes, there was no saws big enough to cut that tree. It was huge, and so my father and my uncle went to over to Fort Bragg, and they found a saw, a big enough saw, a big old two-man chainsaw, and they brought that down here. They bought it and brought it down here, and they cut that tree up, and they cut that one slab out of it, and they said, we need to make a monument out of this, and so they loaded it up on our truck that we still have up there, old 42 Chevy, truck and trailer, and they brought it down and built a little, with the help of the community, they built a little roof for it and stood it up sideways, and it sat across right at the entrance to Lower Lake for years, right on the side of the road. It was there the whole time I was a kid, until it was moved up here to the museum. But yeah, and that chainsaw is still sitting in our shop up at the ranch.
Oh,
Still
okay.
runs.
Wow.
Once in a while we pull it out if we have something huge to cut on, but it's a beast. It's a beast.
And did your mom work outside the home?
She did, in the sense that she owned a ranch back in the 70s, and she was married to my father, 70s and 60s, and it was called the Rafter J.E. Ranch in Middletown. It's at the same location where the mansion is today, right there along the highway, just before you get to Butts Canyon Road. And she owned a ranch called the Rafter J.E., and they ran thoroughbreds and cattle there. So she was busy. She was a horsewoman, but other than that, she was a homemaker, mom.
And tell me some of your earliest childhood memories.
Oh, if I can remember that far back. Best ones, I think, are just here in Lower Lake, playing with my brothers, and because I was the youngest, and I just remember my dad working over in the machine shop, and I would go over there, and I'm just a little kid walking through the machine shop with all these rough and tough guys working there, and I just remember being able to go anywhere I wanted, going into Lawson's General Store and getting candy, and a lot of fun playing with my Tonka toys out back. I loved being in the dirt and playing with my Tonka toys in the back of the house, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
And did you have a best friend as a kid?
As a young child, not really. I was kind of a loner. I had friends, but a lot of them were kind of older because I was the youngest. I didn't have one specific friend until I got into junior high and high school, and then, yeah, I had a couple really good friends, and one was Frank Toney, and we were absolutely best friends. We were inseparable, and another friend of mine, Mike Huber. And unfortunately, we lost Frank about 12 years ago, and I miss him dearly.
And did you have any hobbies as a child?
Yeah, I used to do model railroads. I loved tinkering with little things like that. And So that was fun, but as I got older and I got too busy, I couldn't keep up with doing it anymore.
And what was your favorite subject in school?
Oh, history, U.S. history, to be exact. I loved it.
And where did you go to high school?
Lower Lake High School. Graduated in the class of '83.
And who was your favorite teacher?
Oh, I had several of them. And they're all kind of equal, but there was Gordon Sadler, my coach, football coach. Great guy, great mentor. Loved him. And there was Walt Campbell, who's a great guy, great sense of humor. He would put up with my crap. And Bill Sternus was my English teacher. He was an awesome guy. And Patsy Huggins was a great teacher. Just good people. And Frank Tradici, he was my track coach and my yearbook teacher, and still see him periodically, and good people. They were more than just teachers to me. They were friends and mentors for sure. And I know there's a few more out there that I probably didn't mention, but and if I didn't mention them, I apologize.
How has the world changed since you were young?
Oh, it's changed a lot. But change happens and you have to deal with it. I think people are a little oversensitive today in today's world. And when I was younger, you had to, the old saying was, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. So you had to have a tough skin, because sometimes people didn't say the things you wanted to hear them say. And they weren't always on your side. But you had to toughen up. You had to be able to deal with it and separate what was truly harmful and separate what was just might hurt your feelings. You had to be able to do that. And I think the world today and the youth of today, they're wound up like an 8-day clock, and they're a little oversensitive. That's my opinion, but I think people need to just toughen up a little bit, because the world isn't easy, and you got to be able to let things fall off your back a little. You can't take everything so serious when it comes to dealing with other people, because everybody's got their own opinions, and we live in a free country, and you have to be able to deal with that, And I wouldn't trade that for nothing, Being able to say what you want, and even if you have to hear something you don't like, the freedom is worth that. And I think that's what's forgotten today, in short.
So did you have any goals or dreams for when you grew up?
Yeah, mine were pretty simple. I wanted to be a truck driver, which I was. I wanted to be a firefighter, which I was. And I wanted to be a farmer, which I am, still to this day. So the 3 things I wanted to do, I've done as far as doing something with my life. It's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be outdoors.
And when did you first volunteer at the fire department?
Oh, that was in April of 1982. I joined the Lakeshore Fire Department because at the time I was living with my mother in Clear Lake, and at the time, so I was in Lakeshore's fire district at the time, and I knew a lot of the guys down there, and they started a cadet program, and I was still in high school, and several of us joined as cadets. I think there was 5 of us. I'm trying to remember. It was Chris Lane, Eric and Craig Scoville, myself, and Mike Mattiota. And I don't know how many people know the story of Mike Mattiota, but he was killed in a fire on Mount Baldy.
Oh.
And I believe it was 1984. And it was tough on the whole community.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was rough. and he was a really good guy. And so yeah, that's how I got in. It started in '82, and just last month I retired from the volunteers with Lake County Fire Protection District, which is the result of the merger between Lower Lake and Lake Shore in 2001. And so I just retired. I retired out as battalion chief fire marshal for the district in 2019, and then so I stayed on 4 more years as a volunteer. I kind of came in as a volunteer, and I wanted to go out as a volunteer, and so just literally last month I turned in my boots.
Did you go to college?
I went to college for 1 year, but then I realized college was definitely not for me, and to me it was a big waste of time, and I wanted to get to work, and I wanted to become a firefighter, and I knew I could do that at the time, not going to college. And college would have helped me, but I might have took a little bit harder road, but I got to where I wanted to be. And I got a full career out of the fire service, and I can't have idle hands, and I had to go to work. I just wanted to go to work. And that's what I did.
When did you get your first paid firefighting gig?
1992. In January of 1992, I started with the Lower Lake Fire District. They hired me on as a station captain and to maintain the equipment and respond to calls. And that's where that started. And I retired from that. And I went up through the ranks, became fire chief of Lower Lake just before the merger happened. And I followed in my father's footsteps, who was fire chief in the 60s and early 70s. And then the merger happened, and I went back to being a battalion chief and became the fire marshal for him for quite a few years, and that's what I retired out as. So I went through the whole gamut of kind of done every job in it.
What's the largest fire you've ever fought?
Largest fire I ever fought was probably the Valley Fire.
Tell me about that.
Well, that was just an extraordinary event, and
what started it?
I wasn't part of what started it, but I believe it was an electrical issue.
Oh, okay.
And you'd have to go to Cal Fire to get the results on that. And but I ended up being up at our ranch most of the time, because the fire, not only did it burn all the way to Middletown that way, but it burned back to the north too, and that burned into the backside of our ranch. And I was actually off duty when it hit. I was in my fire department vehicle, and Cal Fire battalion chief spotted me up there, and he was from out of town, and he asked me if I knew the terrain, and I explained who I was, and this was my property, our ranch's property, and he asked me to kind of be his eyes and ears for that, and I ended up just working with him for several days in that section of the fire, in that division.
How many acres burned?
Oh, I don't remember how many acres, but it was a lot. It was a lot.
Did it last more than a couple days?
Oh yeah, it went for days. Yeah, yeah, several days. But so yeah, that was the biggest fire probably I ever fought. The worst ones I ever fought was the Clayton Fire and the Sulphur Fire. And that was direct impact to Lower Lake and the city of Clear Lake, and it was pretty devastating. Both of those fires. Those were tough.
What do you remember about the Clayton Fire?
I just remember the initial fire burned to the east the day before, and it burned up about 1,000 acres, and we had shaky containment on it that night. And then the next day, the wind shifted, and it slopped over the lines in a couple places, and the wind picked it up and carried it right into the town of Lower Lake and out in Mustang Court area, Quarter Horse Lane area, and we lost a lot of homes and businesses, and that was a rough day, especially when you're right in the middle of trying to command your forces and work with people to try and get your engines into where they need to be the best, and you're trying to keep yourself thinking, and you're watching your whole town burn down that you grew up in. That was a tough one. I could go into more detail, but it's probably not the best right now.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, it was tough, but we all made it through it.
What are some of the challenges of fighting fires?
Just keeping your emotions in check, because you see a lot of things, and you have to be able to deal with those things in a reasonable manner, in a professional manner, and I was always pretty lucky that I could keep my emotions in check and deal with things and think of them on a, somebody's got to do this work, and it's not easy, but somebody's got to do it. And I think that's kind of the mentality you got to have to be in the fire service, because you see a lot of people's grief, and you see a lot of people's pain, and you have to deal with that with compassion but professionalism. And it's sometimes the two don't always mix if you let your emotions get the better of you. So I was blessed with the ability to be able to do that. I think that's what's kept me in the fire service so long, and I just loved it. And then when I started it as a cadet when I was young, I just loved fighting fire. I couldn't get enough of it. It was a drug to me. I just loved doing it. The adrenaline, the teamwork, working with people, and I love the teamwork aspect of it. I'm working with some really great people that were like-minded, and it was a great career. I have no regrets. I had some rough times, but I have no regrets, and I'd do it over again in a heartbeat, especially knowing some of the people I've worked with. They're just awesome people.
What are some steps property owners can take to protect their homes from fires?
Well, lots of steps, actually. One is you have to keep your vegetation. You can go on websites for CAL FIRE, and they'll give you complete instructions on what you can do, and that's probably the best thing you can do. But just for me saying here, you got to keep your vegetation down around your house. And they have a thing called ladder fuels, that you don't want brush and grass growing up into higher vegetation. You want to keep your trees trimmed up to at least 10 feet, keep weed eating, keep your weeds down to an inch, and don't store a lot of fuels around your house, that kind of thing. Keep your gutters clean, not just in the winter. You got to keep them clean in the summer, because all it takes is when fires run through a community, you get this thing called ember cast. And the ember cast falls down on the community, and it will look for anything that will ignite. And many homes are burned not just from the flame front, they're burned from the ember cast, that one little ember will come down and land, and pretty soon your vegetative material in your yard is on fire. Those kind of things. So best thing you can do is, just like you said, keep your gutters clean, keep the vegetation cleaned up properly. Don't give it a chance to propagate from one plant to another. Keep your trees trimmed up, and keep your grass mowed and down. And like I said, you can go on CAL FIRE websites and stuff. They have all kinds of recommendations and stuff to do, and it makes a difference. Especially when you're out there fighting fire. If a house has got so much fuel load around it, there may be nothing the fire department can do, the fire service can do. I mean, if there's so much fuel. We only got so much water in an engine and so much manpower, and it can only go so far. So you have to take steps to protect yourself, and those are things you can do.
Who was your favorite boss and why?
Oh, my favorite boss. Oh, I've had several favorite bosses. Probably Ford Dinman. He was my boss when we first had the merger, and I'd worked with Ford. He was the fire chief of Lakeshore Fire when the merger occurred between the two districts, and he's just a real good guy, just a great guy, and always fair, fun to be around. Ford would be my favorite. I had some other good ones, but Ford would be my favorite.
Have you had any coworkers that you would consider friends?
Yeah. Many of them, almost all of them, especially in the fire service, and Willie Cepeda, Dave Deakins. There's too many to mention that I've worked with, and they were just good friends.
Do you have any stories about them?
Yeah, but probably I shouldn't tell them here. We have had a lot of fun together too, put it that way. We fought fire together, a lot of us fought fire together, and then I had friends like Mike Huber, who's a high school friend that I still see, and we have lots of stories, but I'll keep those stories to me.
So talk about receiving the Star of Lake County Award. What was that like?
Well, that was an honor, and that was another one of those friends that recommended. It was Willie Cepeda, the chief of Lake County Fire right now, who I could have mentioned as my favorite boss, but he was too close a friend, and I consider him friends. And when he was my boss, he always really treated me really well, and looked at me kind of eye to eye, and I always appreciated that. So I never really, I guess I should have, I never really looked at him as a boss. I just looked at him more as a friend and a guy I could work with, and I think he kind of felt probably the same way. And what was your question again? I rambled on there a little bit too much.
The Star of Lake County Award.
Oh, the Star of Lake County. Yeah, Willie recommended me for the Star of Lake County, which I was honored, and I was surprised that he did it, and I was thankful that he did it, and I was honored to get it. It was a great tribute for my time in the fire service, and to be recognized by my peers in the county. I was honored by it. Has a nice spot on my mantle now. So.
Have you ever been married?
Oh yes, I'm currently married. My wife Patty, and I have two wonderful children, and they're all grown now. One lives in Oregon, and one still lives here in Lake County. She's in the process of building a house, and she works for the hospital and as an X-ray tech, and so yeah, I had very lucky that I've had my wife that I love very much, and we had a good marriage and a lot of fun times.
What are
and
your
two wonderful children? We were blessed.
What are their names?
Fallon and Emma.
Do you have any grandkids?
Not yet. We'll see if that comes along here in the future years. But.
So tell me about the 200-acre property on Diener Drive and how you found the documents explaining the purchase of the property.
Well, our farm was handed down from family member to family member. The farm was established in 1891. And up until just basically a year ago, we never knew the exact date or when the farm was established. And so I'm kind of the quasi-family historian, and I'm really interested in that stuff. And so I said there has to be, so I started doing this. I wanted to do a chain of deeds from myself to the beginning. And my brother and I, we own the ranch 50-50. And so I wanted to find this chain of deeds that went all the way back to the beginning and how it kept being in our name. Because a lot of times these family farms, they get busted up. They get divided between family members, they get sold and stuff. So it's kind of rare that we're now on the 5th generation of owning this property. And so my curiosity I couldn't contain it anymore, so I went on a search and spent many hours at the county going through the recorder's office and books and everything, and couldn't find any deed. As far as back as I could get was 1912, and it was a quitclaim deed from my grandfather back to my great-grandmother that had something to do with the property after my great-grandfather's death in 1901. And couldn't quite make the tie why that all happened like that, but that's as far back as I could get, and I knew there had to have been a beginning. And there was just scuttlebutt and family stories that they'd gotten the ranch from it was an old logging camp, and somehow they got it from an old logger or something like that. And there was originally an old cabin that became the farmhouse, and that part of that house is still there. And it was built early, like the 1870s, something like that. And so I went to the recorder's office and been there all day, and couldn't come up with nothing. And finally I was talking to the gal, and she was a really nice gal, and she was real patient with me. I said, there has to be something. She could see the frustration on my face, and I go, I know it started around 1885, somewhere in there, maybe a little later, I'm not sure, because I know when they came over from Germany. They came over in 1882, and and they came into Lake County in 1882, and so I could kind of see the light bulb come on her head, and she goes, let me check one more thing. And she went out there and knocked the dust off this old book, and it was one of those big recorder's books, and she laid it out there, and it said patents on it. I was like, patents? I wasn't putting two and two together. And then it dawned on me that I'd heard the term land patent, and I didn't know exactly what it was, but I'd heard that term before. And she opens it up, she goes to the D's, and right, Diener Gottlieb, land patent number, blah, 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 February 26, 1891. And then it told what book, recorder's book to go to, and what page. She found that book, took it out of the archives, brought it out, boom, there it was. 2 pages of handwritten recordings of the origination of the ranch, and through a United States land patent. And it was an extraordinary moment, because there I found it. I had the exact date, how it got acquired, and then just by chance, there were some gentlemen that had been working in the recorder's office, and they'd been hearing me all day, and I think they were some sort of a professional land surveyors or land people that search for other people, land issues. And the gentleman comes up to me, he goes, if you don't mind, that's not the document you're looking for. And I said, well, what is it then? He says, that's a recording of the document you're looking for. So he said, that's a recording of a United States land patent. And he said, come with me. And so we went over to the computer, and we went into the United States Land Office, Bureau of Land Management, went to this website, punched in search, and make a long story short, punched in search, found the search page comes up, and puts in the name and the date, and boom, this document, handwritten document that was done in San Francisco in 1891, and it gives the land description that it was paid for, because through a land patent, if you had the money, you could pay the United States government. If they had these patents out for sale, you could buy them, but you had to pay them in full. They didn't give you loans for them, so you had to pay them in full. And my grandfather, they had the money, so they were able to pay for it. And so I was able to download a copy of that document. It's got my grandfather's signature on it and everything.
Neat.
And President Benjamin Harris was the president at the time, and that was the original document. And so I had my trail all the way to my brother and I. So that was a pretty cool moment. And like I said, it's rare for these farms to stay in one family as long as they have. And so we're just going to keep it going as long as we can. It's getting tough, though. California's a rough state to keep things going in sometimes.
What crops do you grow on the ranch?
We grow 30 acres of wine grapes, and we grow 25 acres of organic walnuts. Yeah.
And you guys grew wine grapes before Prohibition,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that was one of the original crops on our ranch, on that parcel. They had wine grapes in the teens and 20s, and actually all the way into the 30s. And then they ended up taking them out. They were able to get through Prohibition somewhat because they were able to grow grapes for sacramental wine for churches and things like that.
Oh, okay.
But then it's kind of funny, there's a 1923 newspaper clipping that we dug out from the Record B, because the sheriff went in and said that my grandmother and my grandfather had too much wine, so it was over the allotted amount. So they went in there and busted up all their barrels. And so my grandmother sued him, and then make a long story short, she ended up losing the lawsuit. But they did keep them all the way through, some of them all the way through the 30s, and then just before the war they took them out and put walnuts in. And that's when we switched out, and then we went full circle in '96. My brother and I. The walnuts weren't. This one particular walnut orchard wasn't doing real well, and so we decided to go all in, and we put another vineyard in, and we've been doing that since '96, and it's been pretty successful. It's doing okay. A lot of work. My brother put a lot of work in it when he originally put it in. He was working full time, and then I was working full time, and he kind of took the reins on it and put a lot of time in it and effort to get it going. And from that time on, we've both been working it and working the ranch. And we've had some moderate success with it. We're doing okay.
So talk about the future plans for the ranch.
Well, right now we're looking at trying to maybe go full circle. My grandparents, they were winemakers, and they made wine out of their own grown grapes. And for the first time last year, my daughter Emma, she was determined to become a winemaker, and she's on her own time. She researched it, and she took some of our own grapes, and she made some wine, and it came out really good. And so we're looking at possibly in the next 5 to 10 years expanding that and actually becoming a winery again, a family winery like we were in the past. And because my brother and I, we were the farmers, but she's got the technical prowess to make wine, and so far she's done really good. I'm really proud of her. She took a lot of time and effort to put into it, and so I think we're going to see where that leads. And so that's what we're looking at possibly doing there, and just continuing with the grapes. We're putting in hopefully we're going to put in some more grapes here in the future, and see where it all goes. But farming is a big question mark right now for people, especially the family farmer. It's rough. You're on a razor thin edge all the time.
So have you ever traveled outside the United States?
I haven't, no.
What's the longest vacation you've ever been on?
Actually just took it, 3 weeks. And it was kind of a business / vacation. My wife and I drove around the country.
Oh.
And then had to haul some stuff back from Kentucky where my brother lives. So it was kind of a business pleasure kind of thing. But we had a good time. So I saw family and stuff down in the southern part of the country, and went into Texas, and I visited my dad's old airfield in Marfa, Texas, and that was kind of cool. And so we had a good trip. And actually just coincidence that you asked. Before that, maybe a week, 7 to 10 days.
Oh, okay.
I'd taken vacations. This was the longest.
And how would you describe your personality?
Type A, I guess. I can be opinionated. I think I'm fair, kind, but I believe what I believe, and I'll stick to that. And I can be very determined sometimes. Describing me, growing up, my older brothers and my friends and people, they'd call me Grandpa because I was always so serious and determined. And I carried that through with my life, I think. But I always thought I was always fair and kind, and loved being around people and being social with people. I like to be with my friends and party here and there. So.
And what kinds of hobbies do you have right now? How do you spend your time?
I don't really have hobbies. I just spend all my time at the ranch, doing the ranch. I'm up there every day working, and I love doing it. And it's hard work, but can get frustrating sometimes, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And so that's how I spend my time.
And what would you say are some of your greatest accomplishments?
Oh, putting all my time in the fire service and the ranch. I've always had a vision on how I want things to look and do and come out, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to do things that I love doing, and that was with the fire service also. And so yeah, that would just as a whole, ranch and the fire service, there was a lot to accomplish in those places and those two things, and I think I've met that.
And what are the most important lessons you've learned in life?
Never give up. Find a way. When you're down, get back up, dust yourself off, and go at it again. Never give up. Find a way.
And what's the best advice you could give future generations?
Work hard for your goals. Be determined. Never give up. Get a thicker skin. Toughen up. Be kind and fair. and I think you'll do okay.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, unless you have any more questions. I'm just was happy to do this. This is interesting, and I like talking about my family history, and like I said, I'm kind of my family historian, and there's a lot there to unpack, and I could go on for hours talking about family stuff and my family history, but I don't know if you have that much time, so.
Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today and for sharing your stories.
No problem. I was happy to do it, and I love the museum here. It's a wonderful gift to Lake County and Lower Lake, and I grew up with watching this museum. I remember riding by my bicycle on this thing, and it was closed up at the time when I was a child, and I always thought it was haunted. It was creepy. But then when Jane Weaver and the museum community got together and they brought it back to life, it was just a wonderful thing. And I just love this museum. It's a great museum.
Well, thank you.
Real tribute to the community. So much history. So, other than that, that's me. This is my great-grandfather. This is my great-grandmother Marie, and I believe her little sister, but I'm not sure. I'm just going because they resemble each other. This was probably taken in Germany when she was still real young. This is a family portrait which I believe was taken right after they came over from Germany, or just prior to them coming over. And this is my great-grandfather, Gottlieb, my great-grandmother, Marie. This is Alice, which is this gal right here. This is my grandfather, Ernest Diener. That's him right there. And this is Gustav Monk, who is his stepson and her son from a previous marriage. And this photo right here was taken around probably 1912, 1910. And this is the field just outside of Lower Lake going down Morgan Valley Road, right just past the Jonas Bolt.
Yeah.
And this was Lower Lake days. And,
cool.
And this is my grandfather, and he was in the marching band. And I'm not sure who any of these other folks were.
Okay.
They're just townspeople.
Okay.
So, obviously this guy was with him in the band, friends.
Got it.
And this is my father and I'm very pissed off Uncle Ernie because my father's on the trike.
Oh.
And this building's still standing up at the ranch. And this is a picture of my father, and my uncle, and the dog. I think his name was Zipper, and I can't remember for sure. This is picking cherries. This was in later 30s, probably been 30, 35 or so. And that's my father. Not sure who that is. My grandmother, Doris. My uncle, Doris's mom. This is my dad on leave during the war.
Oh, okay.
He was on leave. He had 30 days leave from the Army. My dad and my cousin George, when they went and got the tree, and that's the tree that they cut down and brought down and put it in Main Street. And he did it for years with this truck.
Okay.
And this truck is still up at the ranch. It still runs. And then this is the house, my grandmother's house, the ranch house. And this is the summer, what we call the summer house. All three still exist, although
Okay.
we are in the process of trying to bring the house back to life. Me, my brother John, my brother Jim, and our little dog Curly out playing out back. And this was probably about 68. This is my grandmother's friends, my grandmother, my brother Bill, me, and some of my grandmother's friends, Ursula and Lisa. And I can't remember their last names. They were my grandmother's German friends. And they spoke German. That's all they spoke. So when my grandmother would get around with them, she would speak German with them. And I actually started to pick up on it when I'd get around them, and then I'd lose it again. I'd go back to English after they would leave. And again, this is getting into the 60s here. This is my grandmother. This is my brother John, my cousin Linda, my brother Jimmy, my cousin Pauline, my cousin Eileen, and my mother. And this is a picture of my dad and my brother in the old bar and restaurant called the Sportsman.
Which brother?
My brother Bill.
Okay.
Billy when he was a little kid. And playing the jukebox, putting money into the jukebox. And that was in the bar area, because we could actually go into the bar because it was a dinner place too. So kids could actually go into the bar. And then this is my dad and my brother Bill during the Lower Lake Day Parade when my dad was fire chief driving this Jeep, his chief's vehicle at the time. And we have that Jeep. We bought that Jeep back from the Lewis family, from Dick Lewis, just before he passed. We tracked it down and found it again. I use it all the time now. And this is a picture of the ranch, probably circa 20s.
Okay.
And this is a picture of the old vineyard right here. And this is when they first put in walnuts and fruit trees
Okay.
across there. And the house is underneath all these trees. And this is just a picture from my uncle's house on top of the hill looking down at the walnut orchards somewhere in the 1950s. And this is a wintertime picture of during World War II. This is about 1943 of the vineyard during winter. And then the house is down below. And then they're drying walnuts in the 1930s on the drying rocks. That's how they used to do it, out there on the racks. They'd set them out every day and put them up every night. And then this is the first tractor crawler that they got, which replaced the team of horses. They got that in the mid-30s. And it's my grandfather, my Uncle Ernie, my dad, and my grandmother. We still have that tractor. And this was either, I believe it was right after the war. This picture was taken, my dad and my uncle.
Okay.
And we still have both of those. We still have that truck, still runs today. And we still have that tractor. And this again is right after my grandmother came over from Germany. And she came over with $22 in her pocket, I believe it was. And she had to be sponsored by a family. She was basically a mail order bride when she came over from Germany. She knew the family and they sponsored her, and Germany's was in really bad, their economy was in a shambles after World War I, and they'd suffered 1 million casualties after World War I, and So the men population was a little low.
Yeah.
So she came over here kind of as a mail order bride. That's it.